Hello, friends. I, Gennia Nuh, project lead for the Story Project 11 by www.tellmeyourstory.biz, welcome you to the next session of the Letters from Santa series. The project Letters from Santa is addressed to parents and children. Though Santa is a mythical creation, most of us are blessed with the participation of our parents, especially the mothers in our life who look after us, take care of us, fulfill our wishes, and guide us in the right path. This project aims at providing insightful guidance and evoke interest in certain aspects of life that may shape the life of children better. Today, I'm privileged to have Aashisha Chakraborty, Sunita Roy, and Chandna Singh Nirwan this evening, and we are going to discuss why is studying language and history important. Let me begin with introducing the panelists. Aashisha Chakraborty is a PM Yuva author and Write India winner whose debut novel, Misadventures of a Sales Girl by Rupa Publication, is loosely based on her experiences as a sales manager. Her second book is a work of historical fiction with the National Book Trust. She has written for The Hindu, Readomania, Women's Web, and Inside IIM. A compulsive reader and an avid traveler, she is an MBA from the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, New Delhi, and a computer engineer from Jamia Millia Islamia. She has also modeled for a German photographer and likes to blog on her online diary of sorts, The Mind Bin. Chandna Singh Nirwan is an academician, an author, and a thinker. She did her master's in English from Christ University, Bangalore, and is presently a senior research fellow in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at NIT Jaipur. She cleared NET in April 2016. She is published in several national and international journals of repute. Chandana has also authored a book titled An Eco-Critical Reading of Tess of the D'Urbervilles. This book is a result of her research in the field of eco-criticism. Her present areas of research are Dalit literature, myth, archetypes, land, politics, and identity. Sunita Roy recently finished her master's in computer application and is now planning to appear for NET this year. Other than that, she is an avid reader and occasionally she loves to write as well. She has a dedicated page for her passion of reading and writing on Instagram, which she feels like a journal to all her thoughts. She also loves to collect pre loved books as they have a different story to tell. So let's get going. Please tell us how language and history have impacted you as you grew up. Let me start with Chandana.
Thanks, Gennia. Thank you for the lovely introduction. Good evening, everyone, and thank you, TMYS, for having me here. Genia, I would like to make a very general observation on that question that you have put forth. Language and history are quite vast subjects, and there are some meeting points of language and history. And one of them happens to be identity, the other is mythology. So there's a lot of research to support that language has a direct impact on our identity. It shapes and influences our identity. I'll give you example from our daily life where language comes into our daily interaction and how it molds our children's identity. So first, when the children are there in their formative stages, um, they are often gendered through language. Much before they know the concept of gender, they are gendered through language. Second, the various cultures and traditions that are performed, the celebrations of the festivals that are being carried out, they are all speaking of our family, of our ancestors, of our socio cultural background, the religion, the family practices, and all these elements are pointing towards one's identity. Third, where interaction becomes important is during the bedtime stories. So what happens is, much before a child can actually pick up a book and read on mythology or watch a TV show, they are exposed to these bedtime stories, these mythical tales in the form of bedtime stories, and everyone has a version of their own. And it becomes very important how we are wording these stories. And, for example, how we are talking about the character of Draupadi to our kids. So, all these factors that are shaping a child's identity are dependent on how we are using the language with them. And of course, additionally, I would like to say that language, we communicate through language. History is documented in language, whether verbal or oral, or the folklores. And most importantly, we think in a language. Now, this is going back to the philosopher Rene Descartes, where he said, cogito ergo sum, translated as, I think, therefore I am. And our thoughts frame our personality, and our personality has a great impact on our future. I would like to stop there.
Thank you so much. Now let's start with Ashisha. Ashisha, would you like to answer to the same question?
Sure. So I think it's something which authors are very intimately connected with because we all have a very um, core understanding of the language because we start thinking in a certain way. And I remember when I was a kid, uh, I had not entered school, I used to think in Bengali because that was what I'd learned at home. And then eventually, through play school and after a couple of years, suddenly the language in the head changed and it became a kind of English. So I somehow feel that this whole aspect of the language changing and giving us the voice, for our thoughts, it's pretty crucial. I think there was this particular, I think, some Guardian article which said uh, that it shapes our understanding of the world around us. The things we say, as Chandna correctly said, the things we say, I think, therefore I am. They make you a person. They make you do certain things. The whole idea of positive reinforcement rotates around this. When you keep telling things in your head, repeating those things make you do those things, right? About history, of course, history provides a precedence or provides a certain role, encourages people to ask questions, to analyze evidence, to come up with arguments. So language definitely impacts someone hugely. If I go, I mean, this is completely on a generic level and on a big level. Now, when we come down to the brass tacks, when we come down to what who we are surrounded by, we are surrounded by different people. So there's at the center of a huge circle is you as a person, and then you have your family, you have your school, college, office, whatever. And then a huge, basically the entire ecosystem basically revolves around you, and the way and the vibes that you put out and the things that you say basically determine your relationships with everybody, and it starts right from childhood. So that's probably why, even my parents were pretty, my mother was pretty specific about developing language. She got me books, she asked me to read them. I'm glad she did that. So I think that is one crucial way in which we can get better more thinking, not better. I would not use that word. I would just say better thinking individuals and more aware and more enlightened people because the more refined our language is and the more clear we are in our thoughts, that's how I think clear decisions can be made. And we can establish more lasting and more meaningful relationships with people. And I think that it goes the same for nations and countries, because even when you have treaties, countries have treaties, they always say that, let's have a dialogue instead of war. And that's where your language comes in, because this dialogue is going to prevent a lot of things which are not helpful to anyone. So I definitely think language and history have had a deep impact on me. I personally, as an author, have always wanted to convey my ideas and convey what I think through my reader to my reader, never known to me. The way other authors who have really really looked up to have impacted me, so that I felt very in tune with, say, Ayn Rand or Enid Blyton or Agatha Christie. These people, I mean, not just mentioning the foreign authors, I mean many other Indian authors as well. So it makes you feel very connected to them, and that's the power of language, and that's what we as authors, I'm sure, I mean, I would want to develop someday in my writings.
Thank you so much, Aashisha. Now, coming to Sunita, would you like to give a take on this particular question?
Hello everyone. So I just wanted to start with my own story, how I grew up. My father is an ex-army, so I got to uh, I got to experience a lot of culture and a lot of languages that we are talking about. So I met a lot of people when I was a child. I went through a lot of people's culture, the way they interact with each other, how they live, their festivals. We always celebrated their festival. They celebrated everything with us. So it was just a fun thing for me, reading about it as well. As a reader, I am. So I am so nervous right now, but still, I would like to share a small thing. I used to live in Dehradun, so my father, when I was in like second class or something, so I have the memory because it was a very like it put the core value in me uh, in such a depth that I have I am carrying that values to my life since now. So yeah, and I also want to say that Dehradun is a very connected, like it connected to me a lot because I love to read Ruskin Bond sir's book, and he always talk about Dehradun and things like that and hills. It's like home to me. But that's it. I would just say I grew up with the culture, different culture, as my father was in army. So like that. That's all I would like to say.
So, yes, the history, even though a little bit fictional, that has been means portrayed or that has been conveyed to you by Ruskin Bond on such different genre levels or on such different literary formats has somehow helped you to connect to that place. And yes, language is an essential tool that helps you to get through that and to make yourself means experiments to make yourself express to others as well. Thank you. And I can see Koral Das Gupta's book Draupadi peeping right from the back. That caught my
Oh,
attention.
thank you. I just love
That
her
caught my
book, so I just
attention.
kept it on like public view.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Now, coming to the second question of the session, the first language that we learn is our mother tongue. But stepping into school, children have to learn at least one more language. What do you think are the advantages and disadvantages of learning multiple languages? Let me start with Aashisha this time.
I think I kind of answered this question a little bit in the previous one. As I said, we learn multiple languages when we're not in our home state or home country. As a Bengali, was born and brought up in Delhi. So I learned Hindi, I learned Sanskrit, and eventually during MBA, I also learned a bit of Spanish, a bit of French. It definitely gives you a big platform to talk to. And somewhere I feel that, especially, I remember during my exchange program where I was spending a term in France, there it became very easy to talk to people when, I mean, of course, when you know the language, but like you intimately connect with them through certain elements, um, certain phrases. And I think that is what helps. Even, the whole idea of, reading a book in that particular language in which it is written, I think that is very interesting, and that kind of made me want to learn a lot more languages. I mean, I do want to learn other languages too. So learning different languages might be time consuming, might somehow, get you all confused, and do these interfere with different linguistic abilities, and you speak one language and other languages keep peeping in. But I think it completely changes your cultural landscape. It completely makes you a global citizen, of course. And then the whole literature is open for you. The entire pieces are open for you. You can read, if you know Russian, you can read Gogol, and if you I really commend Champa Lahiri, if I'm not wrong, that she's gone on to write in Italian. And I don't know if I'd ever be able to do that. That is something very brave to do. Leave the language that you've been doing for so many years and then write and imbibe another language. That makes the importance of the thoughts that you have and the ideas that you have more powerful, because of course the nuances of a language are different. Whenever you write in a particular language or speak in a particular language, um, you have a lot of power and control over the words, synonyms, the grammar and the structure part of it. But ultimately, when translations also happen, like Perumal Murugan's book went for the Bookers, and last year Gitanjali Shree's book won, we realize that the ideas are more powerful. And if you have a little bit of a little bit of, like you said, the second language, the third language, that kind of gives you a much bigger perspective, because you can see where the author came from, what was the benchmark for that author when they wrote. As a kid in school, when they step into the school, I think that's the best place to learn anything, not just language, of course. And language is the hardest thing to learn when you get older. So I think it's the best thing if kids can have different languages at that point of time. I feel I should have learned more. I mean, I personally feel I should have taken on more languages at that point of time when I had a better capacity. Learning now would be much more difficult. But yes, the first language that we learn is our mother tongue. But I definitely feel, for especially all of us, most of us would be living in big cities and or different towns, where we become different people, because we speak different languages. And having a smooth transition, having different languages in your kitty definitely helps. So disadvantages, I can't name any. Advantages, I have a lot of them. I just said. So yeah, I think that was a great experience.
Thank you so much, Ashisha. Now, coming to Chandana. Chandana, what is your take on this question? It's how does the learning of multiple languages affect children on a positive note as well as on a negative note, if there are any?
Of course, there are several advantages to it. Like Ashisha pointed out correctly, we connect to people better. We learn to understand their psyche and how they move in their cultural groups. We understand, you're able to connect better, of course. And of course, for a disadvantage, I think there's only not really a disadvantage because it can be handled. It is something that I have experienced because I have a 5-year-old at home. Sometimes what happens is when you are helping them learn a second language, they sometimes show a disinterest towards using their mother tongue. And there comes a time when they start thinking in the second language more than the mother tongue. I'm not being biased towards any language. It's just that I believe that a child should be able to handle all the languages equally well. And therefore, I say that it can be consciously maneuvered by parents, and they can strike a balance and introduce activities at home to maintain that sort of a connectivity with both languages or others. And also, what is important is in language learning is, any language it has its own grammar, vocabulary, enunciation, intonation. But what is the crux of language learning is learning how to speak, when to speak, and what to speak. So, if we can teach our kids these three elements of language acquisition, I think they'll be able to forge healthy and better interpersonal relationships, and they'll be more confident individuals.
Thank you so much, Chandana. Coming to Sunita. Sunita, you have lived in so many places. So obviously you have picked up languages, or phrases or words from different languages in India. So, what do you think? How does learning of multiple languages affected you as an individual and affected means when you grew up, obviously, and also how does it affect a child from your perspective?
I would say, like, I'm a Bengali, and I do not know how to write. Like, other than my name, I do not know how to write any complete phrase in Bengali. So I would say that Hindi was actually my mother tongue, if I would say, and English as a second language. So, but when I'm like anxious, when I mess up everything. So, I am a chaotic speaker actually. I just want to say that yes, like Chandana ma'am said, it needs a lot of uh, when we grew up, it needs to be built up then only. So we can learn a lot of languages. Like I already knew, I don't even know my mother tongue, Bengali that is. So parents actually should buck up on that. So my mom tried, but I was like a nasty kid. I never tried to learn Bengali or any other language, as to say. But I can understand a little bit of every language, like my friends, South Indian friends, or Marathi. I can understand Marathi, so I can relate to that part like that way. So yeah, that was like me growing up not knowing my own mother language. I am trying to learn right now, so I am trying, and I can write my own name, my mother's name, my father's, my family's name, and I can read, which is like a accomplishment for me. So yeah, that's it.
So yes, since you can read, so you can also delve into your own mother tongue, means into the literature written in your own mother tongue. So yes, Bengali literature also gives you different nuances of the Bengali lived experience, which is also very rich in culture as well as in history. So yes, that will give you a new tour into your own mother, so-called your own home state. Yes.
Yeah.
Now, coming to the third question of the session, um, would you like to recall some books from vernacular language that you have read in your childhood? Like the books that you have, that means that may have contributed towards shaping your personality. I would begin with Sunita again this time.
So I would say, like I said, I was a nasty kid when I was little. I never used to read books much. It like came recently in my teen years after I started going to college. After I met my boyfriend, he actually pushed me to read more books. So it was him actually pushing me towards books. But the I remember when I started reading, my first interest was towards Ruskin Bond Sir's books. So that nostalgic feeling when I read his books, even when I read Amish Sir's uh, the Shiva trilogy. So it connected me to the mythology. I started liking to read more mythological books. Hence, Draupadi happened to me. So I think that it wasn't very late to start in my teen years, but I started reading more mythology, more romance, and that shaped my character. I am a very romantic person. I love to romanticize everything in my life. So yeah, that will be it. Like my personality, my books shaped me into a romantic person.
Thank you so much, Sunita. Even I should confess that I have also started reading very late. Means it was in my first year when one of my friends, Aashisha, had pushed me into the so-called fantastical world of Twilight. Yes, that means it's a very bad thing to say, but yes, there is nothing very literary productivity out coming out of those books. But that was the series that introduced me to reading, and somehow that particular series had pushed me into reading and rereading and rereading, which I practiced till now in my further books that I work on, or I'm currently doing my PhD. That is the thing. Yes, I also started late, but it's never too late. Once you begin, it's obviously right. Now, coming to Chandana, means what are the books that you have read in your vernacular language, and how did that contribute towards your shaping of personality?
Vernacular language. See, my mother tongue is Hindi, and that is one of the subjects that I've studied at school. So mostly, I cannot recall much at the moment. But what has distinctly stayed with me is one of the poems by Subhadra Kumari Chauhan, which is Jhansi Ki Rani, and the couplet, no, the "Khub ladi mardani, wo to Jhansi wali Rani thi." And another, I remember my mom reading certain novels, and she would share the summary sometimes, and I might not be able to recall the entire thing, but what I remember here is once she was reading Mrityunjay, which is by Shivaji Sawant, and she was reading a translation where she shared that it is from Kern's point of view, and that later on gave me a different dimension to think when I was doing my research on Dalit writings, and that how Kern was a low caste, and how his story evolved and was taken differently. So another, couplet that I distinctly remember is from Prithviraj Raso, where Chandra Bardai guided Prithviraj Chauhan when he was shackled and blinded, of course, deceitfully by Muhammad Ghori. And Chandra Bardai, through his couplet, told Prithviraj Chauhan his exact position, Muhammad Ghori's exact position and location where he was seated. Uh, so he could, and this is what he said. It was something like, चार गज नो चार बास 24 गज अंगुल अष्ट प्रमाण ता ऊपर सुल्तान मत चूके चौहान. So with this, he told him the exact position and the location where he was seated, and Prithviraj Chauhan was able to make a successful aim at him. So, I remember the Panchtantra stories, and these narratives of courage, valor, and bravery. And how it has helped me in shaping my personality is something, I don't give up on anything in life. And even no matter how difficult the circumstances, I think in this way, especially, these narratives have been imbibed, and yeah, and a strong value system will always help you in to face the unfavorable situations. So this is what I have to say.
Coming to Ashisha, uh, please reply to the same question as to how books in the vernacular language had resonated in you and contributed towards forming your personality.
So as Sunita said, that she also does not speak in her mother. I mean, she probably does speak, but does not write in her mother tongue or read in her mother tongue. It's been the same with most of us who've not grown up in our home cities. It was the same with me, and I kind of regret not reading Pater Panchali or all these Gora and all these things in their actual language in which they'd been written. So that is one. But yes, as Chandna also said, that her Hindi was one of her languages that she studied in school, even I did. And I was fond of those stories that she said, the Jhansi Ki Rani, and the ones in our supplementary reader, which we ended up reading. I mean, I used to read a lot at that point of time. I especially remember Munshi Premchand ki kahaniyan. I had been gifted that as part of some contest, and I loved them. Shatranj ke Khiladi and all those, and I was floored. I think of course, we do. I just don't think it. We do underestimate regional literature quite a bit, because I remember two authors distinctly who I had read in actual proper Hindi, like thick books, just like we read a normal English books now. So that was Munshi Premchand and Amrita Pritam. Recently, I purchased a book of Amrita Pritam's collection of short stories, and I'm quite excited to read them. But this is what it feels very intimately true and real, like the landscape and all these people who we are talking about. They're very near us. You've seen these people around in your society, and even in your history, in your grandfather, grandmother. So that is very powerful, I think. Apart from that, Malgudi Days was a complete favorite. I mean, I know I've not read the actual Tamil version, of course, but the English version, I loved it. I loved all R.K. Narayan stories, and I'm also a fan of Ruskin Bond. I think there are very few authors who I'm not a fan of. So, and then Thakumar Julie, by I used to watch, if not read. So these are some books which I completely loved. And although I've not really gone very far in reading Hindi literature, but I would definitely like to restart that and kickstart that part. Um, One thing which I would like to mention is language has always been a very integral part of my life. When I was like in school, then I had this issue. I could not speak proper Hindi because I just joined in and I had lived in a completely Bengali community. Of course, I was a kid. I was 4 years old, but I couldn't speak Hindi. It was very difficult. If I could understand, but I couldn't speak. And many years, like not many years, I think many months went by, and I couldn't do anything. And my teacher is coming back and saying that she does not speak at all. So then, when you develop a different language, and then that becomes your second mother tongue or whatever it becomes, and it's quite interesting, and it definitely shapes your personality because a colonizer's mindset. I think I was watching some video yesterday. I don't remember the persons, but they said that people in Africa have this guilt or this shame of not knowing English at that point of time. And he was praising India for not having that guilt and having Hindi as the official language, if I'm not wrong. So, what I'm trying to say is language has somehow been these three elements: language, religion, and economics. I think they've been very powerful movers in the entire history of the world because they shape the people's mindsets and what they give to their next generation. Even I think while I was growing up, I used to feel a little inferior when I was growing up. I don't know Hindi. I don't know why I don't know Hindi, but I don't know Hindi. Eventually, of course, I learned when I entered school. But this language thing, even right now, regional writers. So my second book, and I'm going to talk about my first book because that has something to do with the language. My second book is a part of the Yuva scheme where people wrote in different languages. And when I met people from different states writing in different languages like Malayalam and Bangla and Assamese and Nepalese, so it was very interesting for me. It was an eye opener for me that kids are actually doing that, and all under 30, by the way. So that was very interesting. And my first book that I wrote also had some language overtones. So I've repeated that quite a bit. I'm a Bengali who lives in Delhi, and then I got posted to Chennai for sales as a sales intern. Therein, what I wrote about the kind of, when you're in sales, you actually have to connect at a different level. You have to connect with the people because these are sales executives who are not more than 10th pass, and sometimes they're 12th pass, but they write it on paper. They might just have dropped out in 8th or something. So what I'm trying to say is it creates a barrier when you're not able to talk. So Tamil was a little bit that I've learned over time, a little bit, while working there for 6 months or so. And that's where my first book came out. When I wrote Misadventures of a Sales Girl, I happened to have it. So this is about this girl who went to Chennai, and she faced a lot of problems which she had to deal with because she was in Chennai. She did not know the language, and she had to sell in that language to people who are of a level that, I mean, did not learn the second language basically. So I think language is a very key component in our consciences, in our psyches, and in the kind of people we are. So, yes, it has these books, not just these books, but the whole idea, but the whole learning of different languages have contributed hugely to making me who I am. And I think language is going to be a big part of my life from now on.
Thank you so much. Could you just give another glimpse to your book?
Yeah, that'll be my pleasure.
Okay,
That's a pleasure.
Misadventures of a Sales Girl.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Wow, it looks lovely, colorful. It's very
Yeah,
beautiful, the cover.
it has a
I would
couple of
like to
Tamil
read
terms
it.
too. It has a couple of Tamil terms too. I learned quite a bit though.
Okay. Okay. Now, coming to the fourth question of the session, all of you are voracious readers, but means while you were reading stories or while you were reading books, did it ever make you want to switch to another historical era? Because means what touched you most in those books? Means was it the language, the characters, the imagery, or something like that? Means obviously some people do read historical fiction, the mythologies and everything. Mythology also forms a very key component of history. So in that case, have you ever felt like switching on to a different historical era? And if so, why? I'll start with Chandana this time.
Thanks, Genia. See, I have been reading since an early age, and then I pursued my, graduate, undergrad, and postgrad in English literature, and then a PhD. So, the course of formal training has been such that we read different eras, we read different historical times, and accordingly we read the literature that was produced in that times. So I don't know, but inadvertently, I have become fond of social realism. The genre you can say that I really like is social realism because it tells you about the social, cultural, political background of that novel, and therefore you are able to relate to the journeys of the protagonists, and you can also see how a character has evolved in a particular way. And much before Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe and Ben Jonson's time, we had miracle plays and morality plays, and these are basically performed in a church courtyard to preach the audience or the masses that what is the ideal society. So there were the characteristics like good and bad, virtue and vice would be personified, and these would be performed, and the sole purpose was to preach the masses. Then came the Shakespearean time, the Elizabethan era, and post which we have the Augustan age, uh, which is the neoclassical age, where the classics were being imitated. And we have writers like John Dryden and Thomas Shadwell, and they used to have a battle between these poets, depending on if they were favoring the parliament or if they were favoring the monarchy. And from then on we have the romantics, and William Blake, who was writing poems like The Chimney Sweeper, uh, talking about the harsh reality of child labor. And we also have novelists like Jane Austen, and who was writing about really powerful female characters. And in that day and age, when the first wave of feminism also hadn't started, when she was writing those, I think it really meant something. And it also gives you an insight into what the writer is thinking, and these things really matter. What is the autobiographical note in a novel? And then we have writers like Charles Dickens and Thomas Hardy. And when your question, I can see that is, was it the language, the imageries, the characters, or something else? So language is something that really catches our attention. So when I talk of Dickens, I really the first thing I think of is A Tale of Two Cities and the beginning. The beginning paragraph, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was an age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness, it was an age of belief, and it was an age of incredulity. So the paradox that he's used in the first paragraph itself, I think he had his audience there and then. And of course, it's based on the historical event of French Revolution. And I'm really fond of this genre and the characters, and we are able to relate to them. You talk of any play like Doll's House. There are social realistic plays like by Ibsen and Galsworthy. So there are plenty, but this happens to be my favorite, where we can directly relate to the characters. Thanks.
So for you, it's the social reality, the background as to the what the context forms in a text that actually attracts you, and also how truthful the portrayal of the society is. That's something that you have caught onto, and thank you for saying that, because I teach that particularly right now. I am actually teaching social realism and teaching naturalism, and I'm also concentrating on Jane Austen, particularly her novel Pride and Prejudice, and bringing out the irony and the social realism that she, being of the means being in the early 19th century, but still how she portrays the social realism in her miniature world, in her small, very limited world, but how does she do it effectively? And that's why she's so well known. Yes. Coming with the same question to Sunita. Sunita, what do you think? Means you read a lot of books nowadays, I can see quite a collection behind your back. So, has it ever made you feel that while reading, you feel whether you should move or switch to a different historical era, and if so, why?
Firstly, I would like to say yes, I have a huge collection, but most of them are like unread. I am those kind of readers who like to hoard books, and maybe in 10 to 20 years I will read them. But I do read, not that stretch of time, but I do read books more frequently now. So, yes, the question. So, when I read a particular book, the character I most connect to, the personality, the what would I say, the character of the character. So I just make it my own personality. I feel what they are feeling. So every time I read a new book, I connect to a new character. I am a new character. So that is what. And writing, author, I am a reader, so I connect mostly to the type of writing, the flowery writing people say. So I am, as I said, I am a romantic person. I am more uh, inclined towards those languages that like swoop you over your feet and everything. So I like reading more of those books. I am more of a fiction reader, and I tried a lot of non-fiction, including autobiographies and all that. But I still come back to reading fictions, and in that, when I read about characters, I feel like when they cry, I want to cry with them. When they are feeling low, I want to hug them, give them hugs, and like so. Yeah, I want to travel to their era and like give them a boost of serotonin so they feel a little better. Yeah, that would be it for me.
Thank you so much, Sunita. And coming to Ashisha, Ashisha, what do you think? How do you feel a book means if when you read fiction, obviously, how does it resonate you or convince you to switch to another historical era? And if so, why do you think you feel the need to do so? What attracts you that you want to switch to a different historical era?
I think I think it's the talent of a writer who writes such moving poetry or moving uh, prose that makes us feel so. I remember when I had my I used to read Harry Potter when I was in class 5 and all, and right before during the exams also I used to have it while I'm in the textbook, and in the middle you have Harry Potter's books, and I used to wonder so much about getting a Hogwarts letter. I waited till class 6 because that's when we get older, we become 11, and we're supposed to get that letter. I thought I would get it, I'd read it so many times. So I think that's the power of what a writer can do. The books that actually made me want to switch to another historical era, I would say, see, I could say Jane Austen because Pride and Prejudice is also my favorite book, let me tell you. And I watched different versions of the movie and the series and all the stuffs, and they kind of stay with me all the time. But I don't want to be in that space when women were repressed so much. But one historical era I really wanted to be a part of was the Beat movement, or the Beat generation. I mean, I've read Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac's letters, and I was like, this is the time I should have been there. It kind of coincided with the music movement as well, and I'm a huge, huge fan. So all those I don't know, blues, the whole blues genre came up, and I really wanted to be a part of that. Bob Dylan's songs and all, they resonate deeply within me. So I somehow feel that Texas in those 70s and 80s, I feel like I'm a part of that era, although I may not be actually. But similarly, there are those Nancy Drews when we were much younger. Of course, Beat Generation came, I mean, in my college time when I read it. But Nancy Drews and all, they were there when we were much younger, and I was like, I want something like that. I want to have adventures all day long. So when I say Charles Dickens, I remember Pickwick Papers, I remember Oliver Twist, and it's so much fun. So you're always looking for some adventures when you're younger. You know, you want to use your energy somewhere because you have so much of it. And I wanted to be in those eras where such exciting things happen. So to say that it was the language, probably, but I think it was a narration. Every story at the end kind of stems from the same, I mean, similar things. You know, there's love lost, or some adventure, something you got to find. There's some revolution, but it's the whole setup, and what the author wants to convey to you is what's important, and that is something which is completely the author's onus. Even the Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude, I think that's a fantastic book. And you mentioned, Chandna, you mentioned social realism. I'm quite a fan of magic realism now. Well, from the past past 1 year or so. Uh, I did want to write something in the magic realism genre someday. Justine Gardner is a Norwegian author. I don't know if any of you is a fan, but I love his works so much. The Orange Girl and Sophie's World is his most known work, and they have this. The Sophie's World is all about this book within a book that she reads. So I think those kinds of books like take you completely apart, and you want to be a part of those worlds. So yes, um, there are many, many such books which make me want to switch into different eras. And one thing that I would remember, because I think all of us here are voracious readers, and there was a meme that I came across which said there are two wolves inside me, one which buys books only for reading, and one which buys books for the dopamine rush. And sadly, both of them have the pin code to my credit card. This is someone who share, and I really enjoy. I think you're Sunita. You must be. I mean, you have also got two wolves, so see what wolf, yeah, you want to feed. Okay, thanks.
Now, coming to individual session, these questions will be directed to very particular people over here. So let me begin again. And let me begin with Sunita this time. Sunita, you majored in computer and you are a voracious reader as well, reviewing books regularly. I noted that when you read, you put up bookmarks on pages and scribbled your own notes. It shows your level of involvement as a reader. Would you like to tell us about your reading process? Means I wanted to ask this because many people run through the pages, but they do not necessarily develop a relationship with the book. Please tell us.
So I would like to say I started getting into annotations recently, very recently actually. I didn't like to scribble on my books first when I started reading, but then I feel like I am having these conversations with in my head with the characters that I want to jot down right now, or else I will forget, because I forget very easily things. I forget names very easily. So once I started develop that habit of writing a little conversations that I feel um, going through my head. So it made me uh, scribble all those my feelings actually towards a particular character, that what I am feeling when this particular person is feeling, or what this particular quote makes me feel like. I have like made this book, made this specially made this book as Coral ma'am introduced me to this. So you can see, like, there were so many good quotes and so many relatable things to this book that I loved, and it was somehow fact and fiction mixed. So it was a very good knowledge also for me to read this book and to understand Draupadi's character more. As I was talking to my mother that day, माँ was saying कि ये तो fiction है, तो तुमको और भी इनके बारे में जानना चाहिए. I was like, yes mom, ये fiction है, but I still inclined towards such fictions, such characters जो ऑथर के साइड से, ऑथर का पर्सपेक्टिव से ऑथर्स जो लिखते हैं, सो दैट मेक्स मी कनेक्ट and relate to the character more, even it is a mythological character, or we have read or heard or watched so many times in TV. I think they also are somewhat fiction, those stories or whatever. So everything is a mixture of facts and fiction. So I keep on like jotting down or make a journal about what I read, what I like, what I do not like. So that is why I started doing that, making notes about what I read and what I like. So that's it. I would like to finish it that.
Thank you so much, Sunita. Yes, that is something really interesting. Now, coming to Chandana. Chandana, your area of interest lies in Dalit literature, myths, archetypes, politics, and identity, and more. From that perspective, please tell us your observation on the language of lower caste communities in India and how literature has been used by them to claim respect or stage protests.
Thanks, Gennia. When we are talking about Dalit literature, it's a literature or a writing with purpose. It is inextricably linked with Dalit movement, and of course, there have been their Dalit leaders and several Dalit writers. My research is based on Bama Faustina Susai Raj's works. She's a Tamil Dalit Christian writer, and her works are also informed by Ambedkar's ideology and Rethamalai Srinivasan's ideology, and of course, E.V.R. Perrier. So, what happens is, in one of the interviews, she has also mentioned that whatever has been said and written about them cannot be categorized as Dalit writing. It is writing about Dalits. What they themselves are writing is, in fact, Dalit writing, and in which they are voicing their opinions. They are reaching out to a larger audience because they are all, we must also remember that they are also geographically and demographically marginalized. So it is a medium of expression, of course, of venting out those suppressed emotions and desires, but it is also a medium of connecting to a larger audience. And Dalit writing has, they have spoken about caste discrimination, gender inequality, but they have also spoken about their own stories. And the whole debate of Brahminical stories versus the Dalit stories, centers around the point that their stories have not been heard as much as we know about the Brahminical stories. So, for example, we have heard about Karn, we have heard about Eklavya, we have heard about Tulsi Viva, but have we heard about their regional stories? Now, I was doing a research on the Pariah Dalit community, so no, I know about their regional stories. So one of them happens to be, which is where the language comes into use to determine who belongs to which caste. So there were, and of course, one point I would also like to state here that the Pariah Dalit mythical stories insist that both the upper caste and the so called lower caste are related by blood, which the Brahminical stories completely deny. They say there is no blood relation. And one of these stories happens to be that there are two brothers and there's a corpse of a cow. So the god comes there and he instructs that the corpse has to be removed. So the elder brother says in Tamil, Iyan Thambi Papan, which is translated as the younger one will do it. But it is misunderstood as Yan Tambi Papan, meaning that the younger one is a Brahmin, therefore I will do it. Here, the role of language comes at the forefront in determining the caste, and so Dalit writing is itself a whole genre of writing, and it is they are using it as a means to express themselves. They have often been questioned, Dalit writers have often been questioned, that why Dalit writing is different from the mainstream English language expressions. To which, Obama was asked this question in one of the interviews, to which she said that this is their language, this is a part of their identity, this is a part of their culture, and therefore she would stick to that language and not embellish it to fit into the mainstream writing. So of course it's a writing with purpose, and there are many dimensions to it, more than just expression.
So, yes, the once upon a time who were the colonized now writes back using the tool of the masters, using the language of the masters, but expressing their emotions, their belief, their culture. Yes, that's one thing. That is a very strong point. Empire writes back. Now, coming to the very last question of the session, which is obviously dedicated to Ashisha. Ashisha, you are authoring a book on historical fiction. Please tell us about your research and writing under this genre with reference to your experiences.
Well, thank you for the question. This is my first foray into historical fiction as well. And it came as part of the Yuva program, as I mentioned before. That's my second book. And by the way, it's already out. It was released on the World Book Fair this year by Annie Ernaux, who's the Nobel laureate. So we were a group of 75 authors who've written on different freedom fighters. So writing historical fiction was definitely pretty challenging because all my life I'd wanted to write fiction because you have a lot of matter and a lot of you know it you know what you want to write, and there's no checks there are no checks and balances that you have to do, that okay, this has to be correct. In historical fiction, the first challenge I faced was getting to the right resources, finding out what data are we supposed to use and how are we supposed to use it. I've discovered is you research, say if you do about um, 20% of the I mean 20% or maybe even 15-20% of your entire research is actually used in the book. The rest just helps to make your mindset about it, get you into the character space and the entire people space. So that was one challenge. The second challenge, which of course that was limited to this particular project, and it was the time bit, like it had to be done within 6 months. So that was another challenge which I faced. Writing in this genre was more like not making any anachronisms, like not making any of those mistakes. Like suppose saddle has not been invented in that era, and I suddenly mention someone getting on the horse with a saddle, something like those little bits, and you have to be a little careful about those because people who are well read, they would easily spot these mistakes. um, Another thing which I felt was important to remember while writing historical fiction was, I think I already mentioned sources, but authentic sources. So research papers, JSTOR and ResearchGate and all those places were my go-to places for getting these ideas. Especially because I wrote about a sensitive community. It's the Naga community, which was settled, which is settled in the hinterland of Nagaland, Manipur, somewhere, and it's about Rani Gaidinliu's life. So I gave it a little bit of a fantastical touch. So I call it historical fantasy fiction because this the protagonists have certain powers, if I may say so. So that was something. But it was pretty liberating to go into a different mode, a different era, and live that feeling. And since it was a freedom movement, one gets to, one gets to this, one gets that feeling, that feeling for fighting for freedom, fighting for your independence. And I think that was a fantastic feeling that you get while writing. So that was a wonderful idea. And this is the book, by the way. It was released last month. Yeah. So, what I mean to say is, historical fiction is definitely a challenging genre, but it's getting hotter and hotter day by day. People want to dig back into the past and get everything in documented form. I think it's fun, it's good, but it also needs a lot of responsibility on the author's side to not twist and to keep the integrity intact of whatever you're writing. And as authors, I don't know if I mean, if we are doing justice to it, so we try our best to not mix and match and stuff. So the research was definitely difficult, and the fictionalizing part is of course pretty simple. So I like that part. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this enriching session. I had a very good time. The discussion was also very rich and very insightful as to today. Yes, language and history. History is a part of us. It actually makes us what we are. It shaped us. But yes, language is equally and means it's equally a very important tool. It's a political tool which controls representation, expression, and the portrayal of history with integrity and dignity. So, yes, language and history are the two things which are very important for studying, because with history we get to know as to what were our mistakes and what not to repeat, and what were the glorious past, and also how to keep it intact and not to live in nostalgia. But yes, language serves that purpose. Language takes us through these various phases of history, and yes, and also reinvent ourselves in today's world with the historical background, of course, with the history that makes us. So, yes, it was a very interesting discussion, and thank you, everyone. Thank you for this discussion. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And tell me your story. Calls for submission on the story prompt Letters from Santa. Registrations are also open for the writing program season 9. We hope to hear from you. Till then, stay well, stay happy, stay together.